Here are 10 silver screen icons possessing the most volatile fuses in the business, with a number 2 entry that is utterly jaw-dropping. Beyond the Velvet. Ropes designer gowns and perfectly rehearsed acceptance speeches, there lies a dark open secret festering in the heart of Hollywood. A handful of the industry's massive titans are infamous for possessing explosive rage that has tormented film crews, reduced grown professionals to tears, and spawned tales of wretched behavior that reverberate through the halls of entertainment history, while PR teams work around the clock to uphold the carefully manicured reputations of their A-list clientele. The hardworking individuals operating the cameras and boom mics share a drastically different narrative. They whisper stories of narcissistic outbursts, calculated psychological torture, and occasionally actual physical assaults committed by the very idols that audiences worship at the cinema. There is a very specific reason why production crews utilize code names to alert one another when specific actors step onto the lot, disclosed a seasoned Hollywood production coordinator who has survived working alongside several names on our list. A radio message stating, "The Eagle has landed," is not merely announcing a celebrity's arrival, it is the signal to initiate a well-practiced safety protocol designed to minimize any stressors that might detonate the talent's legendary anger. What makes these combustible personalities so captivating is not solely the stark contrast between their public charm and private cruelty, but rather how the industry coddles them based entirely on their box office returns, the exact same behavior that would result in an immediate firing for a lighting technician is swept under the rug as artistic intensity when it originates from a headliner whose name alone secures millions in bank financing. Tonight, on Legacy Unmasked, we are counting down the 10 Hollywood stars with the most mythological tempers in show business history. These are performers whose emo brilliance on the screen is rivaled only by their appalling conduct when the cameras stop rolling. From screaming rampages caught on audio to physical brawls that necessitated urgent medical care, these are the industry's most dreaded and notorious figures. But first, let us commence with an Academy Award-winning thespian whose monumental breakdown became the yardstick by which all other celebrity tantrums are judged. It was a volcanic eruption so severe that it permanently shifted the way Hollywood perceives the line between method, acting, and straight-up unprofessional abuse. His tirade involved 39 expletives delivered in under 4 minutes. Christian Bale did not simply lose his cool. He manufactured the most legendary meltdown in modern cinematic history, and unfortunately for him, the entire incident was recorded for posterity. You have a character arc in this film, correct? Yes. Define an arc for me. He transforms from a psychopath into a psychotic. Exactly. That is correct. You told him one thing, Christian Bale, the Dark Knight's darker shade, when the audio recording of Christian Bale's nuclear onset detonation leaked in 2009. It permanently shattered the public perception of this intensely private artist. Captured during the principal photography of Terminator Salvation, the 3-minute and 39-second recording featured Bale unleashing a profanity-laced verbal battering upon cinematographer Shane Hurlbut, who had committed the apparently unforgivable sin of stepping into Bale's eyeline during an emotional take. "I want you off the freaking set, you amateur," Bale bellowed in a rampage that included approximately 39 variations of the F-word in less than 240 seconds. "Do you want me to go and trash your lights? Do you want me to absolutely destroy them? Then why are you trashing my scene?" Oh, the sheer ferocity of Bale's anger preserved in high-definition audio that immediately went viral, appalled both casual fans and industry, veterans alike. It was not merely the foul language that unsettled listeners, but the relentless sustained nature of the assault with Bale, repeatedly threatening Hurlbut's employment and professional standing even as the cinematographer tried to offer an apology. "Professionally barely contained and always volcanic," remarked a crew member who has endured working with Bale on multiple projects. What the public fails to understand is that the leaked tape was not a one-off event, but rather a sample of how Bale behaves whenever he feels his artistic process is being disturbed. The only anomaly was that someone actually hit record and released it to the world. While Bale did eventually issue a public mea culpa for the outburst, characterizing it as a heated overreaction during an intense emotional scene, whispers from other movie sets suggest a pattern of comparable conduct. During the production of American, Psycho director Mary Harron reportedly instructed the staff to avoid making direct eye contact with Bale between takes to avoid triggering his unstable fuse. The actor's intensity goes far beyond mere shouting matches. During the production of The Fighter, the very role that would earn him an Oscar, Bale reportedly engaged in ferocious arguments with director David O. Russell, a man who is himself infamous for volatile behavior on set. When two legendary tempers crashed crew, members described screaming battles that practically made the studio walls tremble. What makes Bale's rage particularly noteworthy is how it stands in stark contrast to his extraordinary technical discipline as a performer, explained an industry veteran who has watched Bale work close up. He will transform his physique through dangerous weight fluctuations, master the most difficult dialects, and completely immerse himself in a role, yet he lacks the basic self-control to treat his coworkers with human dignity. He delivers performances that are technically immaculate, yet he completely sabotages that professional veneer with unhinged outbursts that strike fear into the hearts of everyone in his vicinity. Apologists for Bale frequently hide behind his method acting process as an excuse for this conduct, implying that his deep psychological dives into tortured dark souls inevitably bleed over into his real-world personality. But let's be real, the crew members who have stood in the blast zone of his fury strongly disagree with that justification. Method acting does not give you a free pass to treat human beings like they are beneath you, remarked a sound technician who had a front row seat to one of Bale's explosions. Plenty of legendary actors manage to stay in the zone between takes without verbally decapitating staff members who are simply trying to do their jobs. What we went through wasn't artistic dedication. It was straight-up intimidation coming from a guy who knew the production was too deep into fire him. Yet despite a temper shorter than a dynamite fuse, Bale remains one of the most in-demand names in Hollywood. It is a testament to both his raw, undeniable gift and the industry's desperate willingness to tolerate abusive behavior from stars who can still bring in the big bucks at the box office. His capacity to completely morph physically and mentally for his roles continues to dazzle critics and ticket buyers alike, even if his reputation means crew members sign onto his projects with a heavy dose of dread and anxiety. The most agonizing part of working alongside Bale isn't even the shouting matches, confessed a shaken crew member. It is the relentless tension of knowing the bomb could detonate at any second. Everyone walks on eggshells, petrified of becoming the next Shane Hurlbutt. That sort of toxic atmosphere doesn't create better art. It just creates stomach ulcers. Her on-screen work snagged Academy Awards, but the drama she cooked up behind the scenes was even more theatrical. Joan Crawford didn't just portray formidable, terrifying women. She transformed into one the second the cameras stopped rolling. It helped me become a sharp businesswoman. You see, moving pictures gave me every bit of education I ever received, considering I never made it past the 5th grade. Number 2. Joan Crawford, the Ice Queen of Hollywood, possessing a fiery, uncontrollable temper. Long before Mommy Dearest exposed Joan Crawford's alleged cruelty behind closed doors to a horrified public industry insiders, were already all too familiar with the Oscar-winning star's legendary rage. Beneath that carefully curated image of high-class glamour and sophistication that defined her, public brand there lurked a volcanic temperament that terrorized co-stars, directors, and laborers throughout. Her career spanning 5 decades, the wire hangers were honestly the least of your worries, revealed a set decorator who worked on various Crawford productions in the 1940s and 50s. Her explosive fury could be set off by absolutely anything. Maybe the lighting felt unflattering to her. Perhaps costumes didn't meet her impossible standards, or a crew member dared to make eye contact. Without a written invitation, the entire soundstage would freeze the moment she entered. Everyone was petrified of becoming her prey for the day. Crawford's obsession with perfection often mutated into cruel and occasionally physically violent behavior. During the filming of The Women in 1939, she reportedly became so incensed at co-star Norma Shearer that she literally ripped the back off Shearer's gown right in the middle of a take, forcing a costly reshoot and causing a delay that burned the studio thousands of dollars. Executives addicted to Crawford's box office returns allowed this tyranny to continue with barely a slap on the wrist. She once struck a makeup artist with such force that his glasses went flying across the room. All because he had not powdered her neck to her exact liking, claimed a hairstylist who worked at MGM during Crawford's reign there. Another time she hurled a pot of scalding hot coffee at a costume assistant who simply brought her the wrong shade of gloves. These were not rare, isolated events. They were just a typical Tuesday for Joan. What makes the Crawford case particularly mind-boggling is how brilliantly her publicity team polished her halo, presenting her as the ultimate professional, despite the widespread knowledge of her bad behavior within the industry. While other divas with difficult reputations saw their careers crash and burn, Crawford's masterclass in image management and her strategic alliances with gossip columnists helped shield her from public backlash for decades. Joan understood the game of power better than almost anyone in Tinseltown explained to film. Historian who has analyzed Crawford's trajectory, she knew exactly whose ring she needed to kiss. Studio. Bosses, publicity departments, and influential pen-wielding queens like Luella Parsons and Hedda Hopper. This web of protection allowed her to keep her public mask intact while acting however she pleased behind the studio gates. Crawford's temper reportedly grew more volatile as her star power faded with her antics on the set of later films like Whatever. Happened to Baby Jane becoming increasingly erratic. Director Robert Aldrich found himself playing peacekeeper in Constant. Skirmishes between Crawford and co-star Bette Davis, another icon famous for being difficult. Crew members described the production as similar to working in a combat zone where neither side would wave the white flag. The tragic element of Crawford's saga is how her explosive nature eventually built a wall around her, observed a biographer who interviewed many of. By the time Joan Crawford reached her final chapter, the roster of colleagues willing to stand by her had evaporated, leaving her isolated by her own design. Her reputation for toxicity had effectively burned every bridge, and the absolute control she attempted to exert through fear ultimately backfired, resulting in a lonely end. Even her own progeny would later step forward to dismantle her image, publishing harrowing accounts of her cruelty after she was gone. Yet, in a twist of irony, Crawford's status as a cinema legend remains entirely bulletproof. Her iconic turns in masterpieces like Mildred Pierce, the role that earned her the coveted Academy Award, serve as undeniable proof of her mesmerizing command over the audience. This jarring gap between her monumental artistic contributions and her monstrous personal conduct stands as one of the industry's most enduring moral puzzles. It begs the question, how do we separate the genius on screen from the often abhorrent behavior of the human being behind the mask? What made Crawford's wrath particularly nightmarish was not merely its sheer volume, but its icy precision, as noted by cinema historians. While other divas might erupt in chaotic tantrums, Joan turned her rage into a strategic weapon, deploying it with calculated intent to assert dominance. She didn't simply lose control, she utilized terror as an instrument to ensure every soul in her orbit walked on eggshells. Then there is Russell Crowe, a man who doesn't just portray warriors. He has cemented a reputation as Hollywood's premier real-life brawler, boasting a history of violent skirmishes that would make his Roman gladiator persona swell with pride. He once recounted a rugby match from his youth, saying, "I tackled this massive kid right around the ankles and smack he went down like a sack of bricks." Russell Crowe, a gladiator harboring a serious grudge. The evolution of Crowe from a highly regarded Australian thespian to a global superstar ran parallel with the growth of a notorious reputation for volcanic rage, a dark shadow that would soon rival his brilliance on the silver screen. After the Oscar winner's fury has not been limited to screaming matches. It has frequently escalated into physical combat, leading to serious legal entanglements and settlement payouts totaling millions. As one producer famously remarked, his fists seemed to work harder than his publicists ever could. What is truly staggering about Russell's behavioral track record is the sheer visibility of it all. While most difficult celebrities attempt to confine their darker moments to private trailers, Crowe has unleashed his demons in hotel lobbies, at glamorous award ceremonies, and even on live television. Perhaps the most defining chapter in this saga of rage occurred in 2005. Frustrated by a faulty connection while trying to call his family in Australia, Crowe ripped a telephone from the wall of his luxury New York suite and hurled it at the concierge Nestor Estrada, striking the man directly in the face. This was not a fleeting moment of annoyance, but rather the explosive climax of an escalating conflict that resulted in Crowe being handcuffed and charged with second-degree assault and criminal possession of a weapon, specifically the telephone. That single moment of lost control cost him an estimated $100,000 in legal settlements, according to entertainment attorneys, but the financial hit was negligible compared to the damage inflicted on his standing in the industry. He was riding the absolute crest of his commercial influence when the gavel came down, placing a permanent mark of caution next to his name. Studios suddenly hesitated, calculating the risk before anchoring a blockbuster franchise around him. This wariness was entirely justified, considering Crowe's history of volatility stretches far beyond that one night in Manhattan. During the BAFTA Awards in 2002, reports surfaced that he physically pinned television producer Malcolm Gary against a wall, threatening him aggressively, simply because a portion of his poetry recital had been trimmed from the broadcast for time. Similarly, following his triumph at the 2001 Oscars for Gladiator, he allegedly launched a verbal assault against the event staff. A crew member from the set of Robin Hood later confessed that working alongside Russell was akin to handling raw nitroglycerin. His fury could be ignited by the most trivial inconveniences, a line reading that didn't sit right a whisper in the background, or even the ambient temperature of his dressing room. While some days were professional, the crew lived in constant anxiety, never knowing when the volcano might erupt. Directors have faced a unique set of trials when attempting to harness Crowe's intense energy. On the set of State of Play, insiders reported screaming matches with director Kevin McDonald over deep disagreements regarding the script and character motivations. Even Ron Howard, a longtime collaborator who directed him in Cinderella Man, found it exhausting to mitigate Crowe's outbursts when the actor felt the technical aspects of filming were hindering his performance. The complexity of navigating Crowe's temper lies in the fact that it is often inextricably linked to his artistic integrity, explained a filmmaker who survived a production with him. He isn't angry just to be difficult. He is often fighting for what he perceives as the best creative choice. The tragedy is that his delivery is so hostile and threatening that it completely invalidates the valid artistic points he attempts to raise. Unlike the scandals of other stars that remain rumors, Crowe's aggression has been documented extensively by paparazzi lenses and surveillance tapes. This undeniable visual archive has made it impossible for his PR team to spin these stories as fiction, eventually forcing Crowe to confront his own nature in the press. "I have a temper," he admitted candidly in a 2006 interview, trying to explain the source of his fire. "But I think rage is a necessary quality," he added, suggesting that his darkness is the fuel for his art. Anger is frequently misidentified. It is essentially raw fuel, the precise kind of combustion needed if you intend to forge your existence into the exact masterpiece you envision. This perspective branding rage as a form of creative gasoline illustrates how Hollywood typically glosses over toxic behavior from male icons, framing it as evidence of fiery passion and dedication to the art instead of identifying it as the gross workplace misconduct it would be labeled as in any other professional setting on Earth. The heartbreaking paradox of the Russell Crowe saga is that his immense gift and loyalty to the work have been completely obscured by his failure to master his own volatility, noted a casting director who has managed multiple productions featuring the star. He remains one of the most chameleon-like performers of his era, yet the discourse always circles back to his off-screen antics rather than his cinematic brilliance. That is the true victim of his fury, his own artistic standing. Now Edward Norton does not hurl mobile phones or shriek at production assistants. His approach is far more surgical. He will silently commandeer your film, rewrite your screenplay, and hold your editing suite hostage, all while articulating precisely why his intellect dwarfs yours. It creates a chaotic scene like a swarm of industry problems flooding in as if a containment dam suddenly burst open. It is no laughing matter. Number 4. Edward Norton, the micromanager's micromanager. In stark contrast to the loud pyrotechnic outbursts that define most Tinseltown tantrums, Edward Norton's notoriety for being difficult stems from a much more disciplined yet equally destructive brand of hostility. It is a simmering, cerebral arrogance that presents itself as an obsessive need for control, a trait that has estranged filmmakers, production houses, and co-stars across his entire trajectory. He does not detonate. He simmers and rewrites your entire narrative clarified a screenwriter who endured a project headlined by Norton. His aggression is not about volume or launching projectiles. It is rooted in an unshakable conviction that he is the smartest person in the room paired, with a combative readiness to go to war to enforce his perspective, irrespective of his actual job title on the set. Norton's infamy for being unmanageable started nearly from day one, during the post-production of his star-making vehicle, American. History X in 1998. Norton reportedly locked horns so violently with director Tony Kaye that he seized the editing workflow without permission, effectively engineering his own version of the movie. When Kaye objected, Norton allegedly leveraged his rapport with studio heads to guarantee his cut was the one that hit theaters. A staggering maneuver of dominance for an actor. So fresh in the business, Kaye was so traumatized by Norton's coup that he attempted to have his name scrubbed from the credits and substituted with Humpty Dumpty as the director, according to a cinema historian well-versed in the debacle. Although Norton's apologists emphasize that the theatrical release garnered massive critical praise, the standard it established was deeply problematic. It signaled that Norton viewed directors merely as hurdles to be vaulted over rather than artistic allies to build with. This modus operandi persisted throughout Norton's timeline, hitting another explosive peak during the filming of The Incredible Hulk in 2008. Norton, originally brought on strictly as the lead, reportedly overhauled massive chunks of Zach Penn's screenplay without official billing, then battled director Louis Leterrier and Marvel Studios over the movie's final edit. The friction became so scorching that Marvel shattered industry norms by releasing a public statement announcing they were recasting Norton's character for the Avengers, specifically citing a need for a performer who embodies the creativity and team-oriented mindset of our other gifted ensemble members. That Marvel press release was essentially Hollywood cipher for "We refuse to ever do business with this individual again," remarked a studio analyst. Production giants rarely go on record about toxic behavior from A-listers, usually opting to blame scheduling mismatches or artistic divergence. The reality that Marvel basically broadcasted Norton's inability to play nice constituted a monumental slap in the face from a powerhouse studio. Filmmakers who have partnered with Norton outline a predictable cycle. It starts with charm and eagerness, followed by a slow creeping takeover of production elements that generally lie far outside an actor's jurisdiction. It involves screenplay, overhauls, casting vetoes, editing suite demands, and even marketing tactics. When these bids for dominance are pushed back against, Norton reportedly transforms into an increasingly rigid and argumentative adversary. Collaborating with Edward feels like slow-motion hostage situation, disclosed a director who worked alongside Norton on a project in the mid-2000s. It commences with logical-sounding input mutates into relentless debates and ultimately devolves into a war of attrition, where he simply exhausts anyone who dares to oppose him. He never raises his decibels, he just never ever ceases pressing, until he secures his objective. Those who defend Norton highlight his undeniable brilliance and creative purity, arguing that his interferences frequently elevate the finished movie. They insist that his obsession with perfection is born from our sincere dedication to excellence rather than narcissism, and that his uncredited script doctoring has saved many productions, cinematic ventures he touches. The issue has never been a shortage of brilliance or artistic vision on Norton's part. Rather, the core conflict lies in a methodology that completely dismantles the cooperative spirit essential to filmmaking, argued a senior producer who navigated 2 separate productions with the actor. Even when his concepts hold genuine artistic value, the aggressive manner in which he enforces them generates a toxic and dysfunctional workplace, creating an atmosphere where the input of other creative professionals is systematically stifled. That is not partnership. That is a hostile creative takeover. The fallout from Norton's notorious reputation has been profound. Despite possessing undeniable genius and a resume boasting 3 Academy Award nominations, studio executives and directors now heavily weigh the inevitable headaches of managing him when finalizing their casting lists. This risk assessment has undoubtedly cost him major roles that would have been elevated by his immense acting capabilities. Norton serves as a captivating case study regarding how Tinseltown handles problematic personalities. Look closely at the industry analysis. He isn't hurling mobile devices or screeching at terrified assistants' antics the business often overlooks from box office titans. Instead, he is questioning the foundational hierarchy of how movies are constructed, a trait the studio system finds significantly more dangerous than simple emotional outbursts. Faye Dunaway didn't just portray complicated women on screen. She transformed toxic behavior into a dark masterpiece. From launching containers of bodily fluids to physically assaulting makeup staff, her rages weren't merely legendary tales. They were effectively career suicide. Why are you unable to treat me with the same courtesy I would receive from a random stranger on the sidewalk? Number 5. Faye Dunaway, perfection at any price tag. There are scarcely any luminaries in Hollywood history who have melded supreme artistry with such catastrophically unmanageable conduct as Faye Dunaway. The Oscar-winning icon whose turns in masterpieces like Bonnie and Clyde, Chinatown, and Network cemented her status as a generational talent simultaneously constructed a resume of behavior so draining and volatile that it eventually eclipsed her monumental artistic contributions. She was a genius, yet absolutely petrifying, noted an industry veteran who managed casting for multiple projects involving the star. The truly frightening aspect of her rage wasn't merely the volume, but the sheer unpredictability. She could appear totally composed 1 second only to detonate over a triviality like the warmth of her beverage or the specific angle of a studio light. Dunaway's most infamous on-set conduct took place during the production of Mommy Dearest in 1981, where her performance as Joan Crawford eerily reflected the very abuse detailed in the source material on which the movie was based. Witnesses on the payroll recounted how she struck cosmetic artists, hurled various items at her aides, and issued a mandate that nobody could wear white clothing because she found it visually irritating. The irony of Faye embodying Crawford wasn't missed by a single person on that crew, remarked a technician from the set. She would spiral into furies that seemed to summon Crawford's darkest impulses, then instantly snap back into the role when rolling. The boundary between make-believe and reality dissolved into a terrifying haze. Perhaps the most legendary horror story attributed to her happened on the set of Roman Polanski's noir classic Chinatown, according to persistent Hollywood lore. When the director did not grant her an immediate restroom break, she relieved herself in a cup and flung the contents at a staff member who approached her trailer window. While the actress has disputed this specific event, both Polanski and co-star Jack Nicholson have gone on record about the extreme difficulty of managing her. Collaborating with her was akin to dismantling a live explosive device, reminiscent of financier, active in the 1980s. Every detail required absolute perfection. Her lighting setup, her wardrobe, her spoken lines, her trailer amenities, any slight variance could spark a detonation. Teams developed complex protocols just to predict and mitigate her meltdowns. Sadly, these fireworks were not confined to movie sets. During the preparation for the Broadway-bound production Tea at 5 in 2019, her conduct reportedly spiraled into such volatile abuse that the backers made the rare decision to terminate her contract right before the show was slated to move to the Great White Way. Per various reports, she physically and verbally terrorized the staff, hurled objects in anger, and showed up hours behind schedule for practice runs. She allegedly tossed a salad onto the ground when lunch was delivered, screaming that she was watching her. Figure, according to a theater insider with access to the production. She would constantly drop lines, shift the blame for her errors onto others, and manufacture an environment so poisonous that stage managers began suffering from panic attacks. When the investors finally fired her, the official reason cited was physically and verbally abusive conduct toward the creative team. What renders the Dunaway saga particularly sorrowful is how her personal demons systematically dismantled a legendary career. Even with her, magnetic screen presence and raw-skill showrunners and financiers became increasingly hesitant to hire her. No matter how ideal she was for the part, major chances evaporated as her notoriety for chaos spread. For more deep dives into Hollywood's hidden history, subscribe to Legacy Unmasked. Solidified. It was set in stone. Faye's relentless drive for perfection served as her most formidable weapon, yet simultaneously became the architect of her downfall, noted a cinema historian who has closely examined Dunaway's trajectory. The very same fanatical devotion to the minutiae that rendered her on-screen presence so magnetic also made her an absolute nightmare to collaborate with. She exacted flawless execution, not only from herself, but from every single soul in her orbit. However, her strategy for chasing that elusive ideal, utilizing fear tactics, and explosive anger eventually robbed her of the prestigious roles and professional chances she cherished above all else. Yet even in the face of these notoriously difficult chapters, colleagues who survived a production with Dunaway frequently admitted that her sheer brilliance warranted a certain degree of tolerance. Her portrayals in cinematic masterpieces like Network, a role that secured her an Academy Award showcase of visceral emotional intensity and a surgical technical accuracy that barely a handful of performers across history have ever equaled. The real heartbreak of Faye's narrative is that her valid artistic standards were completely overshadowed by the destructive ways she chose to vocalize them. The historian summarized, "A vast number of her ultimatums stemmed from a sincere, unyielding dedication to excellence. But her utter failure to convey those needs in a constructive manner morphed her from one of Tinseltown's most coveted leading ladies into a pariah that studios actively dodged regardless of her monumental gifts." Then there is Sean Penn, whose fury didn't just halt with the tabloids. Rumors persist that he has lashed out at fellow actors, directors, and even bystanders or extras who simply glanced his way. His volatility hasn't merely severed personal ties. It has literally put him behind bars. I have had plenty of time to really contemplate the essential ingredients that constitute a truly good parent. And it really comes down to a sense of constancy. Consider Sean Penn, the method actor's methodical rage. Sean Penn's phenomenal aptitude as a thespian proven by 2 Academy Awards and a filmography stretching across 4 distinct decades has always been paralleled by a temper just as legendary, leading to a rap sheet of criminal charges, numerous civil, legal battles, and a notoriety for explosiveness that even the most lenient power players in Hollywood have occasionally found impossible to stomach. His fury was an intrinsic component of his method and his enduring legacy, remarked a director who has collaborated with Penn. In contrast to other notoriously difficult divas whose tantrums appear divorced from their craft, Sean's ferocity, whether the cameras were rolling or not, appeared to spring from the identical well, a raw, unvarnished emotional truth that rendered him mesmerizing on the silver screen yet genuinely hazardous in the real world. Penn's most high-profile eruptions of wrath have frequently involved violent physical skirmishes with the paparazzi aggressive standoffs that have twice led to incarceration. Back in 1987, he served 33 days of a 60-day sentence for physically assaulting a photographer right on a movie set. In a separate, more harrowing incident, he allegedly dangled a paparazzo by his ankles over the balcony railing of a 9th-floor suite after discovering the intruder in his room. The tabloid clashes garnered the headlines, but they were hardly anomalies, clarified a production coordinator who was employed on a Penn project during the 1990s. His rage could be ignited by practically anything, a crew member accidentally crossing his line of vision, a fellow actor delivering dialogue with a cadence he hadn't anticipated, or even the catering staff providing a meal that displeased him. The whole soundstage would instantly freeze in terror when his mood shifted with everyone steeling themselves for the inevitable detonation. Unlike other stars whose misconduct is largely limited to verbal tirades, Penn's fury has repeatedly breached the boundary into physical aggression. During his short-lived union with Madonna in the 1980s, allegations surfaced that he bound her to a chair and subjected her to physical abuse for several agonizing hours. After discovering her in the company of another performer, an event Madonna has subsequently denied ever happened. On the set of Colors reports state, he punched an extra in the face simply for taking a photo of him without consent. Signing on to work with Sean meant accepting that physical menace was a constant variable in the equation, recalled a crew member who survived multiple Penn productions. He might not actually strike you every time, but he weaponized his body language, his invasion of your personal space, and his glare to make you feel physically in danger if you crossed him. It manufactured a climate of perpetual dread that impacted the performance of the entire team. Filmmakers have encountered unique hurdles trying to manage Penn's volcanic disposition. During the shoot for The Thin, Redline. It is reported that he locked horns so violently with director Terrence Malick that his screen time was drastically slashed in the theatrical release. Similarly, on Shanghai Surprise, his incessant conflicts with the director and production team fueled the movie's chaotic production schedule and ultimate box office bomb. However, what muddies the waters in any analysis of Sean's conduct is his indisputable dedication to social activism off the clock, noted a journalist who has chronicled Penn's trajectory. That very same fire that renders him a terror on set is what fuels his humanitarian relief efforts in Haiti, his intense political campaigning, and his readiness to insert himself into perilous zones to assist strangers. This establishes a complicated moral paradox. When we try to weigh his contribution to the world, this intricacy also bleeds into Penn's dynamic with his co-stars, which has oscillated between profound mutual admiration and blatant antagonism. Performers who can rival his ferocity, such as Benicio del Toro or Naomi Watts, for instance, frequently highlights the positive aspects of their collaboration. However, those who approach the craft of acting from a different angle have often found themselves becoming the direct targets of his scorn both during filming and later in scathing press interviews. Penn essentially splits the world into two camps. The few people he respects, and the vast majority he does not, noted a former co-star who worked alongside the actor in the early 2000s. Once he decides you belong to that second group, there is virtually nothing you can do to redeem yourself or alter his perception. He will proceed to make your professional existence an absolute misery, feeling entirely righteous in his actions, because from his perspective, you have committed the sin of failing to meet his rigid standards for artistic purity and integrity. Yet despite this notoriously difficult reputation, Penn continues to land prestigious roles and draw in the industry's top creative talent. This stands as a testament to his undeniable skill, but also to Hollywood's willingness to overlook and tolerate toxic conduct from artists it deems too valuable to lose. Unlike other stars whose volatility has slowly destroyed their career prospects, Penn's intense aggression remains both his defining personal trait and, paradoxically, his most sellable asset. The industry's constant accommodation of this behavior highlights a deep ethical dilemma in the arts, observed a prominent film historian. If an individual produces art that is truly transcendent but destroys people along the way, where exactly should society draw the line? Penn's career trajectory suggests that in Tinseltown, that boundary is incredibly flexible for anyone possessing enough raw talent. Then there is Bill Murray, whose quirky public image concealed decades of alleged mistreatment. The man famous for crashing random weddings and pouring drinks at house parties has also reportedly reduced co-stars to tears, physically intimidated colleagues, and caused the shutdown of major film productions. As he once joked, women like him because he rarely wears underwear, and when he does, it is unusual. Number 7, Bill Murray, the beloved star's dark side. If you are new here, welcome to Legacy Unmasked. For decades, Bill Murray carefully cultivated a persona as the comedy world's lovable eccentric, the unpredictable genius who might magically appear at a college dorm party, jump into a kickball match, or start washing dishes at a dive bar. This meticulously built image of spontaneous joy and zen-like detachment turned him into one of Hollywood's most universally worshipped cultural icons. However, lurking behind that charming grin was a pattern of allegedly abusive conduct that the entertainment establishment largely chose to ignore until it became impossible to hide. "He is a funny guy until the director yells 'cut,'" remarked a crew member who worked alongside Murray on several projects. The Bill Murray that the internet loves, the guy who jumps into engagement photos and offers philosophical advice to passers-by, bears almost zero resemblance to the man that many film workers have actually had to endure. That version of him can be icy dismissive and explosively hostile whenever reality fails to meet his specific expectations. Murray's problematic behavior remained mostly hidden from the general public until 2022, when production on the movie Being Mortal was abruptly suspended following a serious complaint regarding his conduct on set. Reports surfaced that Murray had allegedly engaged in inappropriate behavior with a significantly younger female staff member. It was behavior he later tried to characterize as a jest intended to be humorous, but which was received as deeply inappropriate and unwelcome. The film was never finished effectively, canceled entirely despite being halfway through filming and carrying a budget of approximately $20 million. The Being Mortal disaster was merely the most recent and highly visible instance of a pattern stretching back decades, explained a director familiar with Murray's history. His volatility and unpredictability have been open secrets within Hollywood since the 1980s. However, his immense commercial value and the audience's deep affection for him forged a protective armor that has only recently started to shatter. Stories of Murray's allegedly toxic behavior span the entire length of his career. During the filming of Charlie's Angels in the year 2000, he reportedly engaged in a heated physical and verbal altercation with co-star Lucy Liu after harshly critiquing her acting skills. According to Liu's later account, Murray began hurling inexcusable and unacceptable insults at her during a scene rewrite and rehearsal, sparking a confrontation that has since become legendary in Hollywood lore. What makes Murray's situation particularly complex is how his legitimate comedic brilliance and singular screen presence enabled 40 years of problematic conduct, noted a veteran industry analyst. Studios and filmmakers were willing to put up with his difficult episodes because when he was focused and cooperative, he delivered magic that no other actor could possibly replicate. This dynamic created a cost-benefit calculation that almost always tipped in Murray's favor until very recently. Richard Dreyfuss, who starred opposite Murray in the 1991 hit What About Bob, has described the experience as an absolute nightmare, claiming that Murray actually threw a heavy glass ashtray at his face during a confrontation off-camera. Director Harold Ramis, who partnered with Murray on comedy classics like Caddyshack and Groundhog Day, endured such severe personal conflicts with the actor during the making of Groundhog Day that their long friendship ceased to exist for over 20 years. Murray would sometimes go completely cold and simply refuse to speak to anyone, revealed a production assistant who worked on a Murray set in the 1990s. He stonewalled inquiries, blatantly disregarded stage directions, and manufactured a toxic environment so thick with tension that it derailed the entire production workflow. On other occasions, the silence would break only for him to lash out, sharpening his legendary wit into a cruel blade to publicly eviscerate anyone he believed had slighted him. Perhaps the most defining feature of Murray's chaotic operational style is his decades-long boycott of traditional representation, no agents, no managers, not even a standard email. For years, he has relied solely on a mysterious 1-800 number. That lacks a voicemail box, creating a logistical nightmare where studios and filmmakers struggle to establish even basic direct contact. Although often painted by the press as a whimsical quirk of a comedy legend, this deliberate isolation effectively creates a firewall, protecting Murray from any real professional consequences. That 1-800 line isn't a cute personality trait. It is a calculated strategic defense an industry insider revealed. With no agents or management teams to mediate, there is absolutely nobody on the payroll tasked with telling Bill when he has gone too far or assisting him in grasping the collateral damage of his outbursts. The safety buffer between his raw impulses and the fallout simply does not exist. There is no career representative whose own financial survival relies on keeping the star's reputation intact. Yet despite the mountain of well-documented on-set horror stories, Murray's undeniable brilliance and magnetic charisma have secured his untouchable status within the entertainment business. Filmmakers still chase him down for marquee roles, fully aware of the chaos he brings, while the general movie-going public stays mostly in the dark regarding his darker reputation. It remains to be seen if the controversy surrounding the Being Mortal production marks the final straw in how much abuse the industry is willing to tolerate. As analyzed here on Legacy Unmasked, Murray's situation perfectly highlights Tinseltown's convenient and selective amnesia when dealing with bankable stars. The very same machine that instantly exiled smaller players for comparable or even minor infractions has spent 30 years spinning Murray's toxicity as lovable, roguish nonconformity, instead of addressing the psychological toll on the crew forced to endure him. This glaring double standard exposes the harsh reality of how power dynamics truly function in Hollywood. Switching gears to another heavyweight, Tommy Lee Jones does not merely act the part of the intimidating hard ass. He specializes in reducing seasoned co-stars and directors to absolute emotional rubble with a single look. This screen legend has no need to scream. His silence screams louder than any shout. While some stars claim their intensity is intentional with Jones, the disdain feels all too real. Number 8. Tommy Lee Jones, the embodiment of cold fury. Unlike the typical celebrity divas whose anger explodes in volcanic, noisy tantrums, Jones has mastered a far more terrifying brand of rage. He weaponizes a frigid, bone-chilling disdain that can grind an entire production to a halt, reducing grown adults to stammering wrecks with nothing more than a soul-piercing stare or a precisely aimed insult. One director noted that nobody on Earth rolls their eyes with more destructive force than Jones. He does not need to hurl chairs or scream until his face turns red to instill fear. His preferred ammunition is pure contempt. It is a heavy, suffocating atmosphere of judgment toward anything he deems amateurish, superfluous, or simply beneath his lofty standards. That silent judgment is infinitely more terrifying than the loudest screaming match from other notorious actors. Jones's legendary status as the Iceman of Hollywood went mainstream after Jim Carrey opened up about their painfully awkward dynamic on the set of Batman Forever in 1995. According to the comedian, Jones once looked him dead in the eye and stated, during a chance meeting at a restaurant, quote, "I cannot sanction your buffoonery," end quote. That single sentence perfectly sums up Jones's philosophy regarding anyone whose creative process clashes with his own rigorously serious method. A producer explained that working with Tommy requires understanding, that the man has absolutely zero patience for anything he views as a waste of his valuable time. This sentiment comes from a colleague who has survived multiple projects with the actor. Jones shows up to set battle-ready and meticulously prepped, expecting every single person to match that intensity. Directors who don't do their homework, actors who love to improv, or crew members who commit technical blunders are all walking into the firing line of his infamous wrath. This fierce intolerance for what he sees as incompetence has sparked countless feuds across Jones's storied career. While shooting The Fugitive, he allegedly locked horns with filmmaker Andrew Davis regarding the technical nuances of the shoot. Later on the set of Men in Black 3, the friction between Jones and his energetic co-star Will Smith grew so intense that production reportedly had to film their scenes apart, just to limit their direct contact. A cinematographer familiar with Jones's process noted that Tommy is especially brutal with directors. If he concludes that the person in charge is clueless or incapable of clear communication, he will effectively stage a mutiny on his own performance, ignoring orders, rewriting his lines, and sometimes physically re-blocking himself for the shot. It is not necessarily a malicious power trip, but rather stems from a genuine conviction that his veteran status grants him superior insight compared to the person supposedly calling the shots. Unlike other divas whose bad behavior is rooted in fragile egos or deep insecurity, Jones's thorny temperament seems to be wired into a fanatical devotion to quality control and efficiency. His background in military school, combined with a Harvard education, manifests in a filmmaking philosophy that worships precision, intense preparation, and rigidity of military-style precision rather than the touchy-feely experimental techniques that so many modern directors and actors seem to adore. The yet frustrating reality about dealing with Tommy is that his critiques are rarely off the mark. When he spots a flaw in the process, he is almost always technically correct. Noted a screenwriter who spent time in the trenches on Jones's productions. The real trouble lies in his savage delivery and his complete blind spot when it comes to realizing just how damaging his disdain can be to the crew's morale. He generates an air of such withering scrutiny that everyone around him starts to panic and fumble their simple tasks, essentially triggering a self-fulfilling prophecy that only serves to validate his already low opinion of their competence. Yet even with his legendary status as a nightmare on set, Jones has never stopped landing major gigs with the industry's elite directors and fellow superstars. It is the ultimate proof of his immense skill and the sheer weight of authority he commands on screen. His Oscar win for The Fugitive, along with 4 other nominations, stands as undeniable evidence that Hollywood respects his brilliance, even if they dread the daily headache of managing his personality. What truly sets Tommy apart is that his outbursts aren't just wild tantrums or a loss of composure. It is about establishing dominance, remarked a prominent film historian. Unlike the volatile stars who erupt without warning, Tommy's rage is surgically applied and completely calculated. He wields his grumpy demeanor like a weapon to force the production to bend to his rigorous specifications, and while his tactics might seem brutal, they often squeeze a higher tier of performance out of the cast and crew, though it comes at a heavy mental price. That psychological toll has actually driven some of his peers to blacklist him personally, refusing to sign on to projects with Jones, regardless of his genius. Filmmakers who prefer a warm, collaborative set, or actors who need space for improv and emotional discovery usually find themselves crashing hard against his unyielding demands and that famous soul-crushing stare. Tommy is the embodiment of an old-guard philosophy that prizes the final cut over the feelings in the room, concluded the producer. He has zero interest in being liked or making anyone feel cozy. His only concern is ensuring the movie hits his impossibly high benchmarks. In a modern Hollywood that is obsessed with safety and inclusivity, his hard-nosed style feels more and more like a relic from a bygone era, even as his on-screen presence remains as magnetic and real as ever. But while he was tough, she was destructive. She wasn't just a handful on one series, she got axed from two of television's most massive juggernauts for the very same toxic antics. Shannon Doherty's infamous blow-ups didn't just burn bridges with friends, they torched entire chapters of her professional life. The Palm Springs getaway, the whole cast went down there and actually jammed out with the grandparents. I honestly loved it. Number 9. Shannon Doherty, the industry's double disaster. It is rare for a TV icon to get the boot from a smash hit because of bad attitude. Yet Shannon Doherty holds the dubious honor of being kicked off two pop culture phenomenons, Beverly Hills 90210, and Charmed for allegedly poisoning the workplace with her explosive rage and endless feuds with castmates. This stunning repeat performance highlights just how intense her outbursts were, as well as the surprising amount of leeway Hollywood originally gave this gifted but chaotic star. She was the ultimate teen drama queen both on and off the camera, remarked a TV producer who navigated the Doherty storm in the 90s. What made Shannon's fury especially destructive was how it played out in the tight-knit ecosystem of a weekly series. Unlike movie productions, where a diva's meltdown is endured for a few months of filming television, demands a sustainable family dynamic that can last for years. Shannon's wars created a level of chronic stress that eventually made keeping her on the payroll impossible, no matter how much the fans loved her character. Doherty's troubles on the set of Beverly Hills 90210 are the stuff of Hollywood legend chronicled by colleagues and bosses alike. Jason Priestley in his tell-all book painted her as chronically tardy, totally unprofessional, and ready to scream whenever things didn't go her way. Tori Spelling later confessed that she personally phoned her dad, the mogul Aaron Spelling, to beg for Doherty's firing following a nearly physical brawl with co-star Jenny Garth, a fight so heated that the crew had to jump in to pull them apart. Her conduct on 90210 wasn't merely annoying, it was a wrecking ball for the whole production, explained a crew member from that era. She would show up hours after call time, whine about her lines march off the set if anyone dared correct her, and generate a vibe of sheer anxiety that ruined everyone's flow. In the world of TV where the clock is always your enemy, that level of volatility triggers a domino effect of delays that screw over dozens of workers. Following her public ejection from 90210, Doherty was miraculously granted a lifeline by Aaron Spelling's company when she landed a lead role in Charmed in 1998. Sadly, this golden ticket to redeem her image ended in déjà vu, with Doherty exiting after just 3 seasons. Surrounded by rumors of a bitter feud with co-star Alyssa Milano. Although the PR team spun it as a mutual departure rather than a sacking, Hollywood insiders have always categorized it as yet another termination caused by her inability to behave professionally. What makes Shannon's saga so fascinating is that her acting chops were never the problem observed a casting director would dare deny. The woman was undeniably electric on screen, dominating both series with a raw, authentic intensity that you simply could not teach. Her magnetism was a huge reason those shows became pop culture juggernauts, but the issue was never what happened between action and cut. It was the chaos that erupted everywhere else. We are talking about legendary feuds with co-stars' alleged mistreatment of the crew and a complete refusal to play nice in the sandbox of collaborative television production. While many Hollywood meltdowns are fueled by drugs or alcohol, this situation was different. It wasn't chemical, it was purely behavioral. Doherty's reputation seemed to stem from a fiery temperament, a volatile cocktail of personality clashes, and an unchecked ego. It was the classic tragedy of too much too soon. She was a young performer handed immense power without the emotional toolkit to handle the crushing pressure of overnight superstardom. Understanding that context is crucial because it makes her eventual transformation so much more powerful. Shannon's narrative isn't just about the fall, it is about the rise. As one television historian observed, her life followed a profound developmental arc. The storm-chasing young actress who seemingly lacked all emotional control back in the 1990s eventually matured into a deeply self-reflective and grounded professional. It was a metamorphosis that few expected. Her brave public fight against cancer exposed a layer of vulnerability and grace that stood in stark contrast to the tabloid headlines of her youth. It proved she had done the hard work of growing up, something many notorious divas never managed to do. This evolution wasn't just for show, it was visible in her career choices. You could see it clearly when she returned for the 90210 reboot. It was a surreal moment where former castmates, people who once swore they would never work with her again, actually welcomed her back with open arms. While these reconciliations don't wipe the slate clean of past grievances, they do demonstrate a capacity for accountability and change that adds a redemptive, hopeful chapter to her complex legacy. A psychologist specializing in young performers noted that TV sets are absolute pressure cookers, and Shannon was thrown into the fire with zero protective gear. She was practically a child navigating adult levels of stress and global scrutiny without any preparation for the psychological toll it would take. Yes, her emotional volatility caused real expensive headaches for production studios, but that is only half the story. Judging her entire existence based solely on her worst days ignores the toxic environment she was in, and more importantly, her later dedication to fixing those flaws. But if Shannon was difficult, the next subject was dangerous. Werner Herzog once directed him at gunpoint, and no, that is not a figure of speech. The iconic filmmaker literally drew a loaded weapon just to keep Klaus Kinski from walking off the set. Even in Hollywood, where bad behavior is often given a pass, Kinski's fury existed in a terrifying league of its own. Before we dive deeper, if you enjoy uncovering these dark Hollywood secrets, make sure to subscribe to Inauim Legacy Unmasked. Toao. Now, let us examine the madness. Number 10. Klaus Kinski, the man who pushed beyond Hollywood's breaking point. While the entertainment industry is famous for tolerating monstrous egos, as long as the money keeps rolling in, Kinski was an exception. The industry prioritizes talent over temperament, sure, but the German actor's volcanic rage tested the limits of even cinema's most generous boundaries for insanity. We are talking about legendary meltdowns, literal physical assaults on the crew, and demands so megalomaniacal they make modern divas look like saints. He carved out a category of difficult that remains unmatched in the annals of film history. As Werner Herzog famously put it, he didn't act insane. He was insane. Herzog knew better than anyone, having survived 5 separate collaborations with Kinski, despite a relationship that could best be described as mutual torture. That quote wasn't an exaggeration for dramatic effect. It was a cold, clear-eyed assessment of a man whose behavior crossed the line from difficult artist to public safety hazard. He operated in a territory that bordered on genuine physical danger to everyone in his orbit. The most infamous example of this toxic dynamic occurred during their collaboration on Aguirre, The Wrath of God, in 1972, deep in the Peruvian Amazon. When Kinski threatened to abandon the project mid-shoot, Herzog reportedly drew a pistol, looked him in the eye, and calmly threatened to put a bullet in the actor before turning the gun on himself if Kinski took one more step. While Herzog has occasionally claimed the story was embellished over the years, he has confirmed the core truth: he absolutely threatened Kinski's life to keep the cameras rolling. It underscores the absolutely extreme life-or-death measures that were required just to manage the actor's explosive volatility. You see, Kinski's tantrums weren't just the usual artistic temperament. They were violent, prolonged psychological hurricanes. A film historian who analyzed Kinski's career explained that these weren't brief outbursts, they were endurance tests. He would scream for hours on end, without taking a breath, physically attacking anyone brave or foolish enough to intervene, creating such absolute chaos that production would grind to a halt. Entire days of expensive shooting were lost to his rage. Yet the moment the director called action, he delivered performances of such terrifying hypnotic intensity that directors felt compelled to work with him again, despite the nightmare he brought to the set. But these issues went beyond just yelling. The difficulties often escalated into unprovoked physical aggression. During the filming of Fitzcarraldo in 1982, Kinski allegedly fired a Winchester rifle into a hut full of crew members simply because their noise was disturbing his rest. He actually grazed an extra's finger with a bullet. On other sets, the reports are equally damning attacks on camera operators, directors, and even his fellow castmates. If he was displeased with your work, you were a target. A European cinematographer recalled, "Working with Kinski meant accepting that your physical safety was never guaranteed." It wasn't just screaming or throwing props across the room. The man would physically charge at people like a wild animal. He would shove them, throttle them, and sometimes even strike them. The only thing that prevented these incidents from becoming tragedies was that the crew eventually learned they had to gang up and physically restrain him until the demon inside him quieted down. When you look at the pantheon of Hollywood's most notorious bad boys, Klaus Kinski stands alone, separated not just by the sheer unhinged intensity of his actions, but by something else entirely. It was his brazen willingness to broadcast his own instability to the world. While most A-listers exhaust themselves polishing a fake veneer of sanity and professionalism for the cameras while acting out behind closed doors, Kinski did the opposite. He wrapped his arms around his chaotic reputation, wearing his madness like a badge of honor. He didn't just admit to the insanity, he monetized it famously, naming his explosive autobiography, Kinski Uncut, which was later released to English-speaking audiences under the provocative title, All I Need Is Love. Within the pages of this shocking confession, he painted a portrait of himself not as a man, but as an untamed beast, actively celebrating the toxic traits and violent outbursts that made him a nightmare to manage on set. Film historians have often noted that Kinski defined the absolute limit of what the entertainment business would endure in the name of cinematic genius. His conduct shattered every norm of workplace decency, going light years beyond what would be grounds for immediate termination in literally any other career path on Earth. And yet, filmmakers kept answering his calls, driven by the inescapable fact that he brought a raw, terrifying, and manic energy to the screen that no sane, well-adjusted actor could ever hope to mimic. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about the heavy price of masterpieces and the dark, tangled link between psychological volatility and artistic brilliance, a story we explore further on Legacy Unmasked. Artistic expression. However, those lingering doubts spiraled into something far more disturbing following Kinski's death in 1991 when his daughter, Paula Kinski, dropped a bombshell memoir alleging that her father had subjected her to sexual abuse starting at the age of 5 and continuing until she was 19. These shocking accusations cast a sinister shadow over his legendary volatile on-set tantrums, implying that his explosive rage was never just a quirk of a passionate, artistic temperament, but rather a symptom of a horrifying, systematic pattern of abuse that bled effortlessly into his private life. The dark legacy Kinski left behind forces us to stare down those brutal, uncomfortable questions about whether we can separate the art from the monster, concluded the film historian. There is no denying that his roles in masterpieces like Aguirre and Fitzcarraldo remain some of the most hypnotic and haunting portrayals of human obsession and madness ever captured. And yet they were crafted by a man whose real-life cruelty inflicted genuine, lasting trauma on the people closest to him. This disturbing clash between cinematic brilliance and moral bankruptcy stands as one of the history of film's most impossible ethical dilemmas. For more deep dives into the dark side of cinema,